Nancy Duffy, and we could not be happier to bring you this very timely conversation on climate change with our special guests, U.S. Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut and former Representative Bob Inglis from South Carolina. Co-sponsoring this program today are Connecticut Public, our statewide PBS NPR affiliate, the Braver Angels Connecticut Alliance, the Town of Greenwich Sustainability Committee, Greenwich Land Trust, Greenwich Audubon, Greenwich Green and Clean, and Waste Free Greenwich. As you may know, LWV Greenwich is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works to empower voters. We envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the ability to participate. The League does not support or oppose any individual candidate for public office, and this event is being offered as part of our educational mission to inform voters about public policy issues that matter to them. That is why we're so pleased to present this program on addressing climate change from two very distinct political perspectives. We are looking forward to discussing not only how we can bring together those from different parties, but also those from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to address this important issue. We're delighted to welcome Senator Murphy, who has served in the U.S. Senate representing Connecticut since 2013. He sits on the Appropriations, Foreign Relations, and Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions committees. He is also a member of the Democratic Outreach and Steering Committee. Prior to his election to the Senate, he enjoyed a long career in public service in our state, serving for 3 terms as U.S. Congressman and for 8 years in the state's General Assembly. In Washington, Senator Murphy has advocated for legislation that supports job creation, American manufacturing, sensible gun safety, and more recently, a bipartisan immigration reform bill. On the environment, he supported both the bipartisan 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which taken together represent historic investments in green energy and climate. Joining Senator Murphy is his former congressional colleague, Bob Inglis. Mr. Inglis, a Republican, served in the U.S. House of Representatives for 12 years, representing the district of Greenville-Spartanburg in South Carolina. In 2011, he turned his attention full-time to promoting free enterprise action on climate change. And the following year, he launched the Energy and Enterprise Institute at George Mason University. In 2014, the effort was rebranded as RepublicEn, and Mr. Inglis serves as its executive director. For his work on climate change, Mr. Inglis was given the 2015 John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award. He appears in the film Merchants of Doubt and in the Showtime series Years of Living Dangerously. He's also given TED Talks at TEDx Beacon Street and TEDx Jacksonville. Mr. Inglis has served as a resident fellow at Harvard University's Institute of Politics, a visiting energy fellow at Duke University, and a resident fellow of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics. Before our speakers begin, I just want to let everyone know that Senator Murphy and Mr. Inglis will each spend about 7 to 10 minutes talking about how they are approaching the issue of climate change, as well as the challenges and opportunities they see in bipartisan and cross-sector cooperation. When they finish, we are going to open the session up to Q&A. We will be alternating between some of the questions you submitted when you registered and those you submit now, live via the Zoom Q&A function. You can feel free to submit your questions anytime, since Nancy Duffy will be monitoring those. Just know that those won't be visible to the larger group, but don't worry, we can see them. And with that, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Senator Murphy.
Great. Deirdre, thank you very, very much. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for all the fantastic work that you do trying to raise very important issues like climate change into the public consciousness and bringing together a diverse set of voices, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, to try to hash out the places where we disagree and the places where we agree. As you mentioned, Deirdre, I have spent a good part of the last 2 to 3 years of my time in the Senate trying to find that hard-earned consensus on some of the most difficult issues that Washington deals with. In 2022, I was very proud and lucky to have been able to forge a bipartisan compromise on the issue of firearms control, the first meaningful gun safety bill in 30 years to pass through Congress with Democratic and Republican support. Since the passage of that bill, urban gun violence rates have dropped in this country by 12%. That's the biggest one-year drop. So when we pass bipartisan legislation and the president signs it, we often get very quick, immediate results. As you also referenced, I spent the last 4 months hard at work trying to find a bipartisan compromise on the issue of immigration, frankly, a more politically vexing topic than even guns. We got that compromise between myself, Senator Langford, and Senator Sinema. Unfortunately, we could not earn enough Republican votes on the Senate floor to be able to move it to the House. Guns is hard, immigration is harder, climate change is the hardest. And so I am looking forward to what I hope will be a informational but candid conversation today about the potential for bipartisan cooperation on climate. When I first got to Congress, somebody made a very simple statement to me. They said, the only two issues that really matter are climate and democracy. And I didn't really understand what they meant by that because I had spent my entire career working in guns and healthcare, housing, all sorts of other things that really matter. And this person said to me, well, if you lose the right to vote and you lose the ability to breathe clean air and to drink clean water, you can't work on anything else, right? You can't make any change on healthcare or housing or immigration or guns. And so it framed for me the importance of this conversation, right? We are on a clock. The way that the science works, if we don't make significant changes in the trajectory of climate emissions from the United States, still 25% of the world's pollution, but also from the world, the rest of the world, in the next 5 to 10 years, it will be too late. And that's a really scary thing as a parent. And I have two very climate conscious kids, a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. I hate the fact that they are climate conscious. I hate the fact that they come home every day worrying whether there is going to be a planet around for them. But the truth of the matter is, the scale of the change that is happening, the amount of extra heat being added to the atmosphere, the arable land that will no longer be arable, the sea rise levels that will wipe out cities or cost us, unfathomable amounts of money in the hundreds of billions to protect against that sea level rise, plus the storms, right, that are now routine, that used to only hit Connecticut and other parts of the world once every 25 years. It will ruin the planet or bankrupt the planet, one way or the other, right? We could probably find some ways to deal with sea level rise, but it will just be a matter of choice, right? Are we going to spend money to educate our kids, or are we going to build walls with the sea? So it's a conversation we have to have. And I am proud of the very rare moments where we have found bipartisan compromise. About a year ago, we entered a treaty that will allow the United States to participate in a global regime to control HFCs. These are sometimes called super pollutants. These are greenhouse gas emissions that come from air conditioners and refrigerators that are much more powerful in terms of how much they contribute to the warming of the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. And by a 69 to 27 votes, that means we got a handful of Republicans, we were able to pass an amendment to the Kigali Treaty that allows the United States to participate more fully in the control of HFCs. I've reached out and tried to find bipartisan partners on legislation. For instance, I have a broader piece of legislation on these so-called super pollutants, which also include black carbon, the emissions, for instance, from cook stoves that are a very frequent use of cooking in developing worlds. I introduced that bill with Susan Collins, a Republican. We have been trying for years to get that on the floor. And so there's a conservative climate caucus in the House of Representatives, led by John Curtis, a Republican from Utah, that is trying to rally Republicans in the House around at least an understanding that climate change is real, and that conservatives should come up with their own solutions on how to deal with climate change. So there are certainly signs that there is the potential for bipartisan cooperation. But I'm committed, right, as someone now who I think is seen as one of the people most effective at bringing the parties together in the Senate. I am committed to trying to find that common ground, and I will continue to do it. But I do want to be honest with you all right now. I have enormous respect for Bob. We served together in the House. We traveled together overseas. But he won the Profile and Courage Award because there's really no home for his view in the Republican Party today. This is a party that has become more radicalized every year on the issue of climate. They are not coming closer to a solution. They are moving further away. When Donald Trump is asked what is the first thing he is going to do if he becomes president, he says he's going to use dictatorial powers on day one to roll back President Biden's climate agenda. That he is openly advertising he is going to suspend the rule of law for one primary purpose: to increase carbon dioxide emissions, because he calls the renewable energy industry a scam business. And so I think we just have to be really cognizant of the fact that right now the Republican Party is heading in the wrong direction, not the right direction. That this is an imperative for the Republican Party to roll back the progress we've made. And the progress we have made has unfortunately been forged only with Democratic votes. The Inflation Reduction Act represents the biggest change in U.S. climate policy in the history of our country. It's not what I think Bob and I would prefer to do. I think Bob and I have always supported repricing, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I've always supported repricing carbon dioxide emissions, right? Properly accounting for all the externalities. You do that either through a carbon tax, or you do that through a cap of carbon emissions and the ability to trade credits underneath. But one way or the other, I would like to just create a proper market where we actually price carbon at the actual price, including the costs of pollution. This bill didn't do that. It basically just plowed a bunch of incentives into renewable energy products like wind and solar. But those credits and those incentives and those funding sources are significant, so significant that the estimate is that the Inflation Reduction Act will, by 2030, bring down emissions from the United States by 50% compared to 2005. And so protecting those gains and building upon them are really, really important. Right now, just to be honest, we have a hard time finding a single Republican in the Senate who will join us in the kind of things we did and protecting the kind of things we did in the Inflation Reduction Act, and we have very few partners in the House. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't give up, right? And there is Republican support for some more modest efforts, right? I think you will find Republican support for transition fuels like gas. And well, I think we sort of have to move so fast that we can't waste a lot of time on transition fuels. I think you will find Republican support for that. You will find Republican support for energy efficiency, which is a big part of the solution. Rob Portman, who left the Senate, was a big proponent of energy efficiency. You'll find lots of Republican support for nuclear power. And sign me up for continued investments in nuclear power. We just haven't been able to really site or build any new plants in the United States in a long time. So it's not to say that there isn't that space, but we, have had a really hard time finding it in the last several years. We seem to be getting further apart on climate, whereas we seem to be getting a little bit closer together on other controversial issues, as we've shown in the last few years, like firearms protection and immigration. So I don't mean to, be the skunk in the garden party here. I just, want to be very honest about my assessment. We'll continue to try to find that common ground. It just remains very elusive right now on the issue of climate. And with that, I will turn it back to Deirdre to turn it over to my friend Bob, eager to hear his thoughts, and I'm sure he has maybe hopefully a little bit more rosy take on what we maybe have in front of us.
Thank you so much, Senator. Appreciate that. Bob, I'm delighted to turn the floor over to you.
Well, first of all, it's really great to be with an actual senator. You know what I mean? In other words, the Senate is a place where the framers counted on people working together to work out differences between the states and to make it work. And the last 4 months, as Senator Murphy has been in the news, shows that that's a real senator at work. So congratulations to you, Chris, for being that kind of senator. And so, Inglis, what are you doing here? Conservative, concerned about climate change. Don't you know this is a liberal cause? Yep, that's what I thought for my first 6 years in Congress. Al Gore was for it. I was against it. Okay, pretty ignorant. That's the way it was my first 6 years in Congress. Out of Congress for 6 years, I tried to get to the Senate and lost a Senate race in 1998, returned to practicing commercial real estate law, Greenville, South Carolina. And Senator Murphy just referenced his climate conscious children. Well, I had one of those who came to me when I was running for the House again, after a 6-year hiatus doing law again. Our son just turned 18, was voting for the first time. Eldest of our 5 kids came to me and said, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." First step of a 3-step metamorphosis. His mother agreed, his 4 sisters agreed, new constituency. So that was step 1. Step 2 is going to Antarctica Science Committee, seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. Step 3, another science committee trip. Something of a spiritual awakening at the Great Barrier Reef. Seems unlikely, right, on a godless science committee trip, because everybody knows that all scientists are godless. Apparently not, because this Aussie climate scientist who was showing me the glories of the Great Barrier Reef and the challenge of coral bleaching was clearly worshiping God in what he was showing me. I could see it in his eyes. It's written all over his face. It was in his excitement. I knew that he was worshiping the creator of those corals, not the corals. So I knew we shared a worldview. Later, we had a chance to talk without the snorkels in our mouths, and he told me about conservation changes he was making in his life to love God and love people. Rides his bike to work, does it without air conditioning as much as possible in Townsville, Australia, hangs the family's clothes out on the line, all to consciously love people coming after us. So I got right inspired. I want to be like Scott Heron, this Aussie climate scientist who's now a very dear friend, loving God and loving people. So I came home and introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009. As Senator Murphy just mentioned, that probably was not good political timing. Note to self, do not introduce carbon tax in midst of Great Recession when you represent perhaps the reddest district of the reddest state of the nation. Will not go well, and did not go well at all. After 12 years in Congress, I got 29% of the vote in a Republican runoff. The other guy got the other 71%. You usually don't do that badly unless you've been indicted or something, but that used to be the case. I don't know. Now, if you get indicted, you might do better. I don't know. But anyway, so I hadn't been indicted. I was just on the wrong side of Tea Party orthodoxy. So that's how I got to this. And after I got tossed out, a foundation came to me and said, "Inglis, with all those conservative ratings you've got, it's pretty clear you're an actual conservative who cares about climate change. Will you speak and write for the proposition?" And so that's what I'm doing ever since. It's now this thing called RepublicEn.org. EN is for energy, entrepreneurship, the environment. It's all red if you go to the site. It's in the language of conservatism. And we're reaching out, building at this point about 20,000 people online. And if you're a conservative and you care about climate change, join us. It takes about 45 seconds at that site. So that's how I got to this. And I feel like I should add this to respond to Senator Murphy's concern about whether we can move forward. I'm going to give you 3 reasons for optimism. And I realize I'm speaking to somebody who's just been beaten and bloodied in the immigration and control the border thing. So again, hats off to you, Chris, for doing all that. But my 3 reasons, I got 3 reasons for optimism on climate. And we just had a webinar where we said we're going to win for these 3 reasons. Number 1 is the realities of climate change. You know, back when I was getting tossed out of Congress in 2010, it was aggressive disbelief about climate change. The Great Recession was on. Houses were underwater financially. Banks were failing. People were worried about their jobs. And so along came some folks in my party who wanted to take that worry bead off the strand. Don't need to worry about climate change. And people were happy to hear that. Oh, don't worry about that one. Worry about your house and your job, and the bank. And it was aggressive disbelief. I don't believe in climate change, and you shouldn't either. It's basically what it was back then. That's all changed now. I mean, at RepublicEn.org, when we're engaging with conservatives, we still find some of those folks. But mostly people have stopped arguing with the thermometer. As my friend Catherine Hayhoe says, it's an argument you can't win, you know? And they're stopping to argue with yardsticks and rulers about sea level rise. It's just obvious that it's happening. So first reason for optimism, the realities of climate change. Second is the demographics of climate change. Senator Murphy just mentioned his 2 climate conscious kids. They I don't know, it may be progressive in orientation, but I can tell you the polling data shows that conservative young people want action on climate change, just like young progressives do. Apparently, they plan on living on the planet for a while. And so that constituency is coming. Now, at this point, it's a low propensity voter constituency, as the League of Women Voters could tell us. You know, you get older, you get to be higher propensity voters. But that constituency is coming. And so what you have is some long time horizon Republicans who want to lead that constituency. And there are a lot of them, as Senator Murphy just mentioned. You know, we got John Curtis in the House organizing the Conservative Climate Caucus. They're a good number. They're 80 plus members of that caucus. It's one of the biggest in the House. And so they're long time horizon Republicans. They see that constituency coming. There's a short time horizon guy who wants to eke out just one more election, just one. He's got a very short time horizon. These people are afraid of him because he's the death angel. He can kill you in a Republican primary. The last midterms show he can't get you elected to anything, but he can doggone kill you in a primary. And so he says that in order to get all these people that sort of like his style excited. But here's the thing. These people plan on winning many elections to come, you know, not just 24, 26, 28, 30, 32. They plan on keep on going. Eventually, this guy's gone. Either he doesn't win in 2024 or he wins. If he wins, I think he's gone by 2026 because your second term of presidency, you're a lame duck 2 years in. And so these people may start asserting themselves and overcoming the fear of that guy. That's the current state of play in my party. Second reason for hope is demographics. Third reason for hope is a policy wave that's coming at us. You know, starting in October 2023, Nucor Steel, for example, in South Carolina, if it's exporting to the European Union, had to start reporting to the EU its carbon emissions on the steel that it makes here in South Carolina. Starting in 2026, they're going to have to start paying essentially a tax, a carbon fee, a tariff, whatever you want to call it. It's a buy carbon credits in Europe. It's basically fork over money to the Europeans that they could have paid here. And I think there's going to be a call from Nucor Steel to, say, Nancy Mace, the first district congresswoman who represents Nucor Steel down there. And it's probably going to go like this. Hey, Nancy, you realize it started in 2026. We're going to be forking over money to the Europeans that you could have collected here. It makes no difference to us. Makes no difference to our customers. Would you rather have us pay it to the Europeans? Or would you rather have it here? I think the light bulb struck going on in the U.S. Capitol that that solution that Senator Murphy just mentioned that we think is the key to this, which is internalizing negative externalities. I've got to stop and say one time I said that to the Greenville News, and the largest newspaper in the district I represented. The guy stopped me and said, "What'd you say?" I said, "We need to internalize negative externalities." He said, "I can't write that in this paper, man. We write at the 7th grade level." I said, "Reveal the hidden cost." Next day it said in the paper, Inglis says we need to reveal the hidden cost of the burning of fossil fuels. Same thing, just side effects, right? And so, but that is the key. And when the light bulbs start going on, as people realize, hey, we're going to be forking our money, Europeans, we could collect here. But then the big light bulb goes on, hopefully, and people realize, Republicans and Democrats, that, hey, we could do this to China. We could make it so that we condition access to our very lucrative market on the payment of a carbon border adjustment. And if you don't pay it, or if you don't want to pay it, you can have your own. And that, of course, is the goal, to get China and other countries to do their own, so that then you get 8 billion people seeing the true cost of burning of fossil fuels, because it's in the price of everything. You know, you go to the store right now, you can choose between a paper plate and a plastic plate, you know, for an event you've got coming up, maybe the League of Women Voters. The paper's a little bit cheaper. Go back after the carbon tax. Paper's going to be up a little bit because, you know, chainsaw gas and natural gas to dry the paper at the mill. But the plastic, it's really up, because it's all petroleum, all natural gas all the time. So which you going to pick? Well, if you're cheap like me, the greener, cleaner, cheaper. Because once you make dirty accountable, green, cheaper is cleaner, but it's also, very importantly, cheaper. And if 8 billion people see that, wow, then we've got free enterprise innovation happening. And we think that's something conservatives can ultimately cotton to, especially if we cut taxes somewhere else while we're doing this carbon tax. The best way to do that, I think, is to reduce the payroll tax, because there's a regressive impact of a carbon tax. And if you're a progressive and you're listening to me, and I'll just close with this, if you're listening to me and you're thinking, why does that guy Inglis sound familiar? He's sitting under that red sign, he's all conservative, all that stuff. Well, might be that solution that I just described, cut payroll taxes, put on a carbon tax, apply it at the borders, is the same thing that Al Gore has been for about 30 years. I asked him several years ago if I could keep on saying that. He said, hold up, Bob, if you're talking a low. I said, no, sir, I'm talking a substantial carbon price that's steadily rising. He said, yeah, fine then. You can tell people what you're for. It's the same thing I've been for about 30 years. So ultimately, we hope we can help bring America together. If we have senators who act like Senator Murphy as a real senator in pulling people together.
Thank you so much, Bob. That was terrific. We'll bring Senator Murphy back, and Nancy, you're here. Great. We have so many questions, and I know we have limited time. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So let me kick off the first question. This is for Senator Murphy. Senator, how do we address the impact of partisan media bubbles on the different ways voters understand the issue of climate change?
Yeah, listen, I think that that's the piece here that is the hardest to figure out. There are not an enormous amount of government interventions, right, to try to fundamentally change the media landscape. I guess what worries me is that you've got some near monopoly companies in the social media space, and so when they make a small decision on how they tweak their algorithm on an issue like climate, it impacts us all in a very big fundamental way. And so I think one of the things we can just do generally in trying to make sure that a handful of individuals or a handful of companies don't have the ability to kind of pit us against each other is to make sure that we are paying attention to antitrust laws. I think really the most important interventions that we have at our disposal are in other areas of law that split us apart from each other. So, one of the things that's happened in the House of Representatives, it happened while we were there, but it's happened even more acutely since we left, is the drawing of districts that are hyper-partisan Democratic districts, hyper-partisan Republican districts. Those districts tend to elect people that aren't interested at all in cooperation. I'm telling you today, it's really hard to get cooperation on climate, but you have to at least try. If you had redistricting reform, that would be really impactful. And then if you had fundraising reform, the fact of the matter is the fossil fuel groups outspend the climate groups 27-1 right now. There's just an enormous amount of money because the industry is so profitable being pushed into politics. Much of it is non-disclosable, right? Much of it goes into these super PACs, so you have no idea how much a fossil fuel company is putting in to an effort to defeat a candidate. So if you had, at the very least, just disclosure, just said, everybody who donates money, you have to know, that would put some downward pressure on the industry, which right now is greatly outspending the forces that are trying to change things.
Thank you. Nancy?
Yes. Okay, this is actually a good follow-up to your remarks, Senator. And this question is for Bob. How can we get the current fossil fuel companies to aid in the transformation of our energy grid? Can they and the Congress help with transparency and education of the public, informing us about how much pollution they and their products are expelling and what they are doing to help mitigate climate change?
Well, it's it's a little bit like asking the chickens to vote for Colonel Sanders, right? That's the challenge. Is we got to figure out some way to. But I would say this: if I were on the board of ExxonMobil, that I were, that'd be fun. I'd be saying at every meeting, hey, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't get with it, we're toast, because Elon Musk is electrifying the fleet. Sure, there's some bumps along the road in that, but we're going to lose a massive piece of our business if we don't figure out a way to invent the next thing, perhaps hydrogen, maybe reforming somehow that natural gas we got, if we could sequester the CO2. In other words, I think it's going to be in their interest to do something eventually. It is sort of strange that ExxonMobil, in on fairness to them, they say they're for a carbon tax. The thing that Senator Murphy just mentioned, that I just mentioned. Now, to borrow from what Al Gore's cautioned to me, maybe they want a relatively low one, but what they don't want is a regulatory regime. You three ways to fix climate change. You can regulate emissions. You can't regulate Chinese emissions, so that doesn't work too well. You can incentivize clean energy, and I agree with Senator Murphy that we've done that, and it's going to be very powerful here in America. The question is whether it works worldwide. because those incentives don't apply to companies who don't pay American taxes. Or third, you can do a carbon tax and apply it at the borders. So a company like ExxonMobil actually prefers that third one. They want to keep it fairly low, and that's where the rub comes if you're out to solve climate change. But at least they're in that discussion, and so it gives me some hope that we might actually move toward that.
Thank you. Great. Senator Murphy, this question is for you. Are the legislators familiar with the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment and the huge ramifications it could have for policy if it were enacted? It now sits with the Government Administration and Election Committee, and if adopted, it could empower legislators to prioritize our environment over the current political and economic priorities that allow lobbyists to override regulations and circumvent laws that would otherwise deliver clean air and water and a stable climate to our citizens. I strongly encourage you to endorse this amendment and fight for it.
Nancy, I apologize. That sounds like a proposed bill that's in front of a committee in the state legislature. I try to pay as much attention as I can to legislation that's pending in Hartford, but I'm not familiar with that piece of legislation. If that individual wants to follow up with my office, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Okay, the next question, Bob, this question says, if you as a conservative believe that our society must change in order to reduce the scale of climate change, does that require a redefinition of conservatism? And if so, what is that definition?
Well, I think that conservative has something to do with conservation. In fact, it's only the last syllable that you get any change on those two things. If you put them up on a blackboard, it's really pretty interesting to see how those things go together. And typically they really have, but then so the intense polarization that came along really, it's hard to exactly date when it happened, maybe back in '94, but it started, and then the germ of it. But then, yeah, it's. I think we're gonna come back to ourselves, is what I have hope. I think we can count on that eventually conservative people who see themselves as interested in the purity of the earth, which is what Jonathan Haidt's research shows, is that's what conservatives care about, will come to roost on conservatism, on climate action for conservatives. And so I think it's coming around, but I do acknowledge that that situation, long time horizon people, a short time horizon guy, it's a tough year, 2024, tough year.
Can I just listen? I actually enjoy hearing some of Bob's optimism, because I think it's important, right? I think it's important, and I agree with him that young voters, and I agree with him that young conservative voters think about this very differently, and so I think that that's all good news. The problem is we have a short clock.
Yeah.
And if Trump is elected and we sort of lose, those 4 years, it is not actually clear whether we can do the job, because there is this moment at which so much greenhouse gas emissions have gotten into our atmosphere that we can't pull it back. And so that's the challenge we have now, right? Is that we kind of can't wait until the Republican Party sort of comes to this new consensus. The places where we have potential alignment on are not significant enough to make the change we need on the clock that the scientists tell us we have to operate on. And so for the time being, we are only able to really get this done with one party. So I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I mean, even if we fail in the short run, we're then going to have some consensus on how to adapt in the long run. But I think therein lies the difficulty here, is that Bob's right that the conservative movement is on a longer term trajectory, on a timeline that the sort of planet is not allowing for.
Thank you. And Senator, in your opinion, is there more partisan disagreement over the risks of climate change, sort of behind the scenes as you're talking to your colleagues, or is the real disagreement over how to deal with it?
No, I think there's real fundamental disagreement. I love the way that Bob put it, right? A worry bead that you have to remove. And I think we all understand the psychology of that. There's so many problems in the world. If somebody tells you that this is not one of them, you're glad to accept that offer. So right now the fundamental problem is that most of the Republicans we work with do not think that this is a problem, at least an acute problem, that needs to be solved on the schedule that the scientists tell us we have to solve it. So, there's some issues here, less than you think. I think there's a lot of people who have an impression that, members of Congress think one thing quietly and do another thing publicly. That doesn't tend to be how this place works. I mean, it tends to be that people do what they think. That's why I try to explain to people on guns. It's not like Republicans are like privately wanted. A lot of Republicans really do think that we're safer if we have more guns. That's just what they believe. And so I do think a lot of Republicans do believe that the climate crisis is not real, or at least it's not as acute as scientists say. And that makes it a harder problem to solve, because we aren't just trying to solve the politics. We are really trying to change people's minds.
Very good.
Nancy, I think given our schedule, this will be the last question to Bob.
Very, very good. Okay. I work in corporate sustainability. There's some limited movement in companies to align their lobbying and trade association influence with their big climate goals. Could corporate pressure move anyone? Seems doubtful given 0 GOP votes for climate action for years. Representative Inglis is the extremely rare.
I think the business case is really important to be made, and we do some of that. There are other people that do it even better, I think. Climate Leadership Council, for example, is a compatriot on the right of center that does it very well. Bicep Series does it very well. And I think that that business voice will be dispositive eventually. The smart money starts moving, and then politics is a lagging indicator. Smart money's already moving on this, and so. But I am also aware of the concern that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse often raises, which is, yeah, show me your lobbying disclosures and how much you spent on it, and then I'll believe you. If people come to him and say, oh, our company's for action on climate, and that's a truism, that's a reality. And so all of this requires some catalyzing event, and I'm not sure what that is. I know that when the Cuyahoga River caught fire, Richard Nixon, who could read polls very well, decided to act on the environment. So at some point, hopefully not by some disaster, but hopefully by some more gentle sort of awareness, we'd come to the need for action. And that's when it's so important to have people like Senator Murphy ready to receive overtures from right of center senators, because just that open mind, open heart, open door. And I would just say to anybody on this webinar that if you're left of center, it's probably the most powerful thing you can do with your cousin Charlie is just say, hey, Charlie, we need you. Be vulnerable enough to tell Charlie, the Fox viewer, we need you. And it may just melt his heart and cause him to get in the head. The head's going to clear up, because I'm certain that ultimately, my optimism is that Senator Murphy's solution there about internalizing negative externalities, it's going to work. And that will get through Charlie's head if you get through his heart first.
I know we're signing off, but I realized as I was doing this event with you all, and this has been really extraordinary. Thank you. I have proof for my admiration of Bob Inglis and my commitment to bipartisanship. I realize this is my backdrop for any sort of Zoom I do, and right over my shoulder there is, you can't see it, but it's a picture of me and a small bipartisan delegation meeting with President Bush. And sitting in that picture right there is Bob Inglis. So I didn't realize this, Bob, but every time I do a Zoom, you're in the
All
shot.
right. That's great. Well, thank you very much for that.
That's wonderful. What a great way to end this discussion. I, on behalf of the League and all of our co-sponsors, I just want to thank both Senator Murphy and Bob Inglis. This has been an incredibly informative and very hopeful discussion. Hopefully we can do more of them. And for those, we had a lot of people attend this event. For those who couldn't, we've recorded it. We will upload it to our website as soon as possible. And we also hope you'll join us for our next event on March 18th, featuring two constitutional law scholars, Penn Professor Kermit Roosevelt III and Yale Professor Akil Rita-Mar. We're going to have a thought-provoking discussion of Professor Roosevelt's new book, The Nation That Never Was. So stay tuned. But thank you both again, and thank you everyone who attended, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.